Good morning. My name is Endo. Thank you for this valuable opportunity. In the ideal world, I would be presenting to you in person, but due to the current situation, I am giving my presentation online. Now, I would like to share my screen. I have been given 90 minutes, and I am not sure how far I can go, but I will try to cover the basics of the concept of attachment theory, and hope that you will gain a basic understanding around this topic by the end of this lecture. First, I would like to introduce myself. I specialize in developmental psychology and the psychology of emotion. Let me share with you the reason why I got attracted to developmental psychology and child development. I think most of you are familiar with Snoopy. Snoopy appears in the comic strip Peanuts together with this boy character called Linus. Linus always holds on to a piece of blanket like this one. In reality, it can be a piece of towel, handkerchief, gauze, or a small piece of sheet, mother's scarf, or anything soft to touch. They hold on to this particular piece of fabric until it is worn out, becomes ragged, or even becomes black and stinky. I think there are quite a few children like that. Even among those of you who are watching the webinar today, many of you might be able to think of a couple of children in your surroundings who have similar habits. In Japan, it was found that 30 to 40% of the children have this kind of security objects. If you turn to the US and Europe, however, the statistics is higher. In some countries, about 70 to 80% of the children have a security object. This is to say that in the US and Europe, it is considered as natural to have a security object, and people sometimes worry if the child does not have one. In Japan, on the other hand, such children belong to a much smaller group. And as a result, there were times in the past when a child had a security item like this one, people suspected that the child was suffering from loneliness. However, today, it is well known that whether or not a child has a security object will not have a significant impact on his or her development. Having said that, there must be an underlying cause for a child to decide to have or not to have a security object. If that is the case, I wanted to find out what leads to such differences, the mechanism behind it. This is what led me to the research of child development. Simply put, I wanted to find out how the environment, the people, and the way in which the child is brought up would influence the personality of the child. I wanted to look at this topic from a more specialized perspective, and this is what I have been doing for quite some time. When we consider the environment in which children grow and develop, there are many important factors. But the most influential to their growth and development are the adults in the children's immediate environment. For example, in the household, mother, father, and grandmothers and grandfathers, and if a child goes to nursery schools from a younger age, the caregivers and teachers there. The adult-child relationship, needless to say, hold an important key to the child's development. One of the angles from which we can look at child development is through that of attachment. In Japanese, we most often use the word aichaku for attachment. I think this is a very nicely sounding word with good connotation. However, because of the Chinese character that is used in this word aichaku, which is ai meaning love, love, I think this word is sometimes mixed up with love or affection. Therefore, in order to avoid confusion and to communicate the correct meaning of the word, I'm using the phonetic representation of the English word attachment in my presentations. The meaning of attachment is to attach or to stick to somebody or something. However, this does not mean sticking to anybody whenever. Basically, it is when a child is scared, feeling insecure, or is emotionally disturbed, the child seeks to cling to the trusted adult to obtain the sense of security, to feel that it is all okay now. This is what we mean by attachment. For a small child, this is normal behavior that can be observed many, even several dozen times per day. This natural behavior, however, has a more significant meaning than we adults think. There seems to be a lifelong impact in both mental and physical health as well as in the perception of happiness. There are many researches on this topic in the recent years. Today, in my presentation, I would like to talk about the basics of attachment theory. Having said that, just to carry on with my introduction, I am teaching at the University of Tokyo, and about 5 years ago, I founded the Center for Early Childhood Development Education and Policy Research. The Japanese name looks serious with many Chinese characters lined up, but essentially, there are many researches conducted on child development here. And as a result, many new discoveries are made. So we thought we could use these new findings to improve parenting and early childhood education, and at the same time, reflect the latest research findings in public policies related to parenting and early childhood education. In the 5 years, we were able to conduct a good number of large-scale research projects. Some of the recent projects include emergency surveys on the impact of COVID-19 crisis on the environment of care and education of infants and toddlers. This was conducted to find out in April and May during the state of emergency how the lives of infants and toddlers changed and how the parents and caregivers maintained their and their children's mental health, and whether they were successful or not so successful in their efforts. Also, in the survey for external caregivers like teachers, they were asked if any special considerations were needed during this crisis. The result of this emergency survey has been put together. It has been nearly half a year since this survey, so the situation has most likely changed significantly, but I think some of the things mentioned in the report can be helpful even now. If you are interested, I invite you to visit our website. You can search for the term CEDEP, and you will find our homepage at the top of the list. I invite you to visit there. Anybody can access and read the reports of our past research projects. With this, I would like to touch upon the topic of parenting during the COVID-19 crisis before I talk about attachment. Partly because of the surveys, we are getting an increased number of inquiries from many people who are involved in childcare, parents as well as educators from all over Japan. We are asked a wide variety of questions. So I would like to share some of them. One of the most frequently asked questions is related to masks and mask wearing. Caregivers need to wear masks when interacting with children. The lower half of the face will be covered, obscuring facial expressions. Some fear that this may impede effective communication. Especially, I hear worries about the impact of masks on younger children who have not yet fully acquired verbal communication skills. However, if you allow me to go straight to the conclusion, even if the lower half of the face is covered by the mask, effective communication of the emotion is still possible. Here is the reason. Certainly, the lower half of the face includes some of the important musculature for facial expression, such as levator anguli oris and zygomaticus major, which is the muscle of the cheek. The fact that these two important musculatures are obscured may interfere for some extent with emotional recognition. In human psychology, it is often said that the center of human facial expression is in the upper half of the face, rather than in the lower half of the face. After all, in the upper half of the face, there are eyes. In Japan, since ancient times, we have been using the expression, "the eyes are as eloquent as the tongue." Precisely, this may be related to the thinking that the eyes are the most important communication tools for humans. As a matter of fact, it is known that human eyes are very different from that of other animals. As you can see in this famous painting entitled "The Cheat with the Ace of Diamond," the movement of the eyes alone can tell a lot of secretive emotional exchanges between people, as humans are capable of reading such subtle emotions from the eyes. As you can see in this photo, the human eye is distinctive in that there is a clear contrast between the iris and the sclera. Cat's eyes and dog's eyes, some of you may have looked into their eyes closely. Polar bears have cute eyes, and this is a chimpanzee. Both of them are cute, but the structure of their eye is pretty different from that of us humans. Human eye is different from other mammals' eye. In other mammals, it is difficult to find the border between the iris and the sclera unless you look at the eye really close. The fact that human eye has a distinct contrast between the iris and the sclera means that just by looking at a person's eyes without the person moving his or her head or neck, one can understand where this person's attention is being directed. And this is how much information the eye can impart. For us humans, eyes are not just an apparatus for seeing. It is often said that they are designed to be seen to convey a wealth of information. The eyes are designed to be seen so that the inner emotional status can be communicated. Or, to put it differently, the eye is an apparatus designed to be seen in order to convey what one has in one's mind. In this regard, the eye is aptly named as communication tool. Especially, the eye and the gaze clearly show what one's center of attention is at any given time. Furthermore, together with facial expressions, we can also understand what kind of feeling one has. In other words, by combining the gaze and facial expression, we can figure out what kind of feeling a particular individual has and towards which object this feeling is directed through this individual's gaze and facial expression. And by combining the information of one's gaze and that of facial expression, we can figure out what kind of feeling one has and towards which object this feeling is directed. In psychology, this process is called social referencing. If you allow me to use a specialized terminology, it is known that social referencing starts at an early age, usually around or before the infant's first birthday. In general, at around 9 months of age, this major developmental milestone is hit. With the acquisition of this mechanism, the child's communication changes drastically. In psychology, this is called the 9-month miracle. For example, a child is staring at something. It looks like there's something on the plate. Most likely it is food. The child is very curious. Can I eat it? But it smells strange. It could be rotten. Or it could be poisonous. Well, it's an infant, so I may be going too far. But let's say that the child wants to know if this is something you can eat. When faced with this kind of novel situation, the infant will look to the mother for cues. Oh, mom is looking at the same object, and she is smiling broadly. This is to say that the child is looking at the gaze of the mother to understand that she is looking at the same object, and by referring to her facial expressions, such as smile, the child understands that this object is yummy and is good. And the emotion that the mother is displaying, that is good. With the facial expression of the mother, the child understands that the object on the plate is yummy and is good. Even infants who have not yet acquired words, as young as 9 months old, are capable of showing this mechanism. It is known. The learning of the meaning of environmental objects through the gaze and emotional displays of adults is possible in humans even in the last quarter of the first year, without the need to actually eat the object or be exposed to any risk or cost. As long as an adult or human being is nearby, the infant can refer to the gaze and emotional display of this adult to determine whether an object is good or bad, unsafe or safe, among other things. In fact, through the mechanism of social referencing, or by referring to the combination of gaze and facial expression of an adult, infants in its early months can use or copy the emotional display of others to regulate their behavior towards the environment. This is what the scholars are discussing. Infants are capable of doing it from pretty early on. So the eyes are found in the upper half of the face. So even if the lower half is obscured by the mask, the center of the facial expression is in the upper half of the face. Raising of the eyebrows, opening of the eyes, enlargement or dilation of the pupils are all said to be parts of facial expression. These are actually said to be the sign or display of the individual's strong interest in an object, or the display of a strong emotion or affection towards the object in the environment. Furthermore, although it's seldom noticed, our eyes are surrounded by fine muscles of facial expression, which is called orbicularis oculi. It's known that the fine and subtle movements of these muscles allow our emotion to be conveyed in such a detailed manner, especially when we say that one's eyes are smiling. When an individual is smiling with the eyes, this smile is coming from the soul. It's coming from the bottom of the heart. It is coming from true love. That's how people say. As a matter of fact, the muscles around your eyes are called orbicularis oculi. You cannot voluntarily control the movement of this muscle. On the other hand, if you smile with the corner of your mouth, this is the area where it is easy for us to control voluntarily. You can easily fake your smile with the corner of your mouth. In other other words, you may be able to fake a smile with the corner of your mouth to express pleasure or happiness. It may not be something that's coming from the bottom of the heart. In contrast, the feeling of joy expressed through a smile that activates the orbicularis oculi muscles which surround your eyes is known to be genuine. Furthermore, corrugator muscles or frown muscles are activated when expressing difficulty, disapproval, and other similar messages. To summarize, thanks to the gaze and the muscles of facial expression found in the upper half of the face, by combining these information, it is said that even from an early age, children are able to read people's minds. And they are also capable of copying the emotional states of others to their own minds and utilize them. And if you allow me to add, of everything that they see, human children are known to like humans the most. If there are people around them, their gazes will naturally direct toward them, and that they are especially interested in the eyes. It is known that children, when they look at people, look especially around the eyes. Looking at the eyes, following the direction of the gaze, and noticing the changes of facial expressions caused by the movement of facial expression muscles, our children get exposed to all of these. For this reason, even when the lower half is covered up by the mask, sufficient communication with the child can take place. This is how I would like to recommend that you think of the situation. In addition, I get so many other questions. For example, because of COVID, parents and caregivers cannot take children out to play that often. They want to take their children out to the park, but they are worried that there are too many people at the park. They want to take children to different places to enrich their experiences, but exhibition venues and amusement parks may be crowded, which is worrisome. As a result, children tend to have more indoor activities, and some people worry that they are becoming less active, that they are getting less exercise. I hear these concerns from many people. Having said that, children can make themselves busy and move around restlessly, even when they are in a confined space. And needless to say, they have much smaller bodies than the adults. Even if it feels too small for us adults, the space can be pretty spacious for the little ones. So I do think that parents and caregivers need not worry about the amount of exercise that children are getting during this period. Further, with less possibilities for children to be taken to different places and less opportunities for them to be exposed to different stimuli, they tend to be doing the same things, playing the same games all the time. Some may worry that they are getting bored, or that less play will negatively affect children's development. In fact, quite a few people seem to be worried about it. However, what we must all remember is that in children's play, if something is missing, children will supplement. If something is not found, they will look for it. In other words, children are good at turning the most boring object into the most interesting object. They will make it the best toy ever for them. In the world of psychology, quite a few scholars say that the best toy for a little child is a stick. There are sticks everywhere, big and small, long and short. And there are different kinds of sticks. Children will bring it from somewhere and hold it in their hands. They will prick something with it, swing it, or engage in a pretend play with it. As adults tend to think that children playing indoors with same old toys and same old books day in and day out will reduce the quality of their play. It is understandable that parents and caregivers should think this way. But children are surprisingly capable of making any object in their surroundings into a toy. If it's not there, they will search for an alternative. Also in psychology, we say less is more. We adults tend to think more is more and want to give children more, thinking that the more we give them, the richer their developmental possibilities will become. So we tend to think the more the better, more is more. But what is surprising is the paradox of child development. Less is more. Even if the environment may seem insufficient from the adult's eyes, children can stretch their imagination to the fullest. And they can conjure up, imagine, create, without limit, anything that they want. Exercising imagination and stretching creativity can have a significant positive impact on children's development. This is what some scholars say. In this sense, children are not as fragile as the adults think, and actually, they are very resilient. If they can't find what they want, they will look for it, they will make it. And this very experience of exercising imagination have many positive influences on the child's psychological development. Finally, let me start to talk about more topics related to attachment. Due to the COVID crisis, we need to avoid the 3 C situations. The first C is to avoid closed spaces with poor ventilation. This is a given. However, the other 2 C's of crowded places and close contact settings, be it with children or adults mingling in crowded places and having close contact with each other, these activities are discouraged these days. But avoiding the close or crowded settings will not affect the relationship between the adult and the child. Will it dilute the closeness? Not necessarily. I do not think that you need to worry too much about it. I would like to now move to the topic of attachment. Let's think about the word attachment. Attach means to stick. Perhaps because of that, attachment is sometimes mixed up with the word skinship or skin-to-skin contact. When I tell the audience that attachment is important, people say, "Oh, that means I need to hold my child more, right?" Or, "So the key is to hold the child tight for a long time, right?" So these are the comments that I get. Yes, holding your child tight is important indeed. Touching skin to skin, feeling comfortable, comfort, and be comforted. This experience in itself is developmentally important. But in the context of psychology, what is more important may be this idea of attachment. Attachment is not about simply holding your child a lot for a longer time. It's not about holding your child longer and tighter. As I have mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, attachment is something that comes up when the child is scared and anxious, and when the child is emotionally unstable. The child needs someone to catch this feeling of insecurity and to help recuperate and regain the sense of security. In the thinking of attachment, this aspect is considered to be the most important element in the child's development. When the child's emotion becomes unstable, acknowledge that by holding the child tight and give the child some sense of security. This is absolutely necessary. At the same time, in the theory of attachment, once the child's emotion is successfully rebuilt, and when the child is filled with a sense of security, do not keep the child by you, rather, so that the child can be independent. Together with the siblings, give a gentle push in the back so that the child can explore on his or her own and cheer for the child to be independent. This is what the theory of attachment stresses. It is not just about staying close to each other. After a child is filled with the sense of security, by being close to the caregiver, then the caregiver should give the child a push in the back and cheer for the child to play or act independently. This is related to the topic that I would like to expand later, but the caregivers need to be the safe haven or safety base for the child. So as you can see, I have practically gone into the topic of attachment. Now, how important is attachment? How much impact does it have? I would like to use one example of a longitudinal study to expand on this topic. Longitudinal studies track the same group of people over a long period of time. This is a study design that involves repeated observations of the same group of people. For example, if the child is raised in a certain way in a certain family at age 0, at age 4, when the child enters preschool, what kind of relationship is he or she building with peers? When the same child enters elementary school at age 8, how hardworking is the child? In middle school at age 14, is the child doing well at school? Is the child delinquent or not? In high school at age 17, is the child participating in after-school activities? At ages 20, 30, and 50, what kind of career path is he or she pursuing? How successful is he or she? At ages 60, 70, 80, and 90, how healthy is he or she? What is the health status? What kind of family did he or she build? Has he or she lived a happy life? In this way, we track the same group of people over a long period of time. As a result, naturally, you can see the relationship between one's upbringing as well as other external factors on their happiness and successes. So these researchers look at the same individuals to find out about the impact of the way one is raised. Longitudinal studies make this kind of research possible. In reality, we do not track just one person, but rather hundreds, thousands, and in some cases more than 10,000 people are targeted and tracked simultaneously. So these are very large-scale studies. It is not only time-consuming, but also costly. Therefore, local governments and national governments need to take leadership in order for these studies to succeed. Having said that, in the world, no matter how long it takes or how much it costs, these studies reveal many valuable information. Therefore, an increasing number of studies are now being conducted in a number of countries, especially in developed countries. In Japan, too, several longitudinal studies have been conducted, and there are some that are now in progress. You may be familiar with this one. One is called Eco-Chill study. This will last until 2027, until the child turns 13 years of age. Actually, This study started when the baby was still in the mother's womb. So they looked at the in utero environment and the health of it. They checked to see if there were substances or the amount of substances that are harmless to the adult but can be harmful for the fetus. As a matter of fact, we already know some of these substances. Alcohol, nicotine, it is common sense that these are harmful, but there are also other substances that we ingest or smell that are in fact harmful to the fetus. And the in utero environment, what kind of long-term influence does it have on the child? This is what the ECOCHILL study is aiming to find out. Another study is the longitudinal survey of newborns in the 21st century. This survey looks at children born in the 21st century, about 60,000 children born in that year. They are checked once every year. This activity is now led by the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology, and it's ongoing. These children are about to turn 20. So also in Japan, we will soon be able to see studies on what one's childhood and upbringing have to do with different aspects of their lives in their adulthood. However, these population studies would still be very young. However, if you look around the world, there are quite a few longitudinal studies conducted over a period of 30 years, 40 years, or even half a century. For example, this book talks about a longitudinal study conducted in Great Britain, and there is a translation available in Japanese as well. In Britain, right after the end of World War II in 1946, they started tracking more than 10,000 individuals born in that year. They have been tracking them up until even now. Those who were born in 1946 are now in their 70s. In addition to the generation born in 1946, 12 years later, they studied over 10,000 individuals born in 1958 and also over 10,000 individuals born another 12 years later in 1970. Altogether, more than 70,000 individuals of 5 generations have been involved in these longitudinal studies in Britain. Information from these studies have become extremely valuable from scientific perspectives. As such, there are quite a few long-term longitudinal studies if you look around the world. There are different types of longitudinal studies for different purposes. And here, I would like to focus on the ones that focus on the importance of infancy and the role attachment plays in this period. Therefore, I would like to talk about this deprivation study, which is mentioned here in the slide. Deprivation means to have something taken away from you. This is what this type of study does. If the things that are taken for granted that the child is supposed to experience are taken away, deprived, if they can no longer experience the things that are the given, what kind of impact will it have on the child's development going forward? A deprivation study will reveal the long-term impact of such experience. So in a word, in a deprived environment, if they started their life from that kind of situation, what will happen to them is what this study is trying to find out. I would like to share with you several major deprivation studies. And also, slightly related to this topic, I will also talk about the interventional study. The deprivation studies have been conducted since more than a century ago in different parts of the world. Studies of children in underprivileged circumstances have been conducted. If you look here, this book is about BEIP, Bucharest Early Intervention Project, conducted in the 21st century. It is also called BABE. This is a study involving children in Romania. This cover is very impressive. This little child has slightly somber eyes and looking to us. And the title of the book reads, Romania's Abandoned Children. And these are the abandoned children, so they are living in institutions. Indeed, if the facilities are well equipped, the children of the facilities are expected to develop in a wholesome manner. However, the fact that these studies were conducted suggests that things were not that rosy. There must have been some issues in the development of these children featured in this book. It is not hard to imagine that. As a matter of fact, the children mentioned in this book are, in fact, developmentally delayed or skewed. Why do these delays occur? Why does the development of these children go awry? Using the latest advances in modern science, the researchers are trying to find out the answers. This book is the interim report of such a study. If the children have significant delay or distortion in their development, we can suspect that these children were and are raised in such miserable and underprivileged circumstances. However, at least in a material sense, or in terms of physical environment, these children were not necessarily raised in a miserable state. Hygienic state was good. They were living in a clean environment. Their nutrition was managed to some extent. They were given enough food to grow. They were able to sleep with warm blankets. Their basic desires, such as eating, drinking, becoming warm, sleeping, these physiological desires were somewhat satisfied in these children. However, physically and otherwise, they did not grow healthy. Not only mentally, but also physically, they were not able to grow in a wholesome manner. Why was this? If they ate and drank and lived in a clean environment and had a reasonable amount of toys and books, why, not only mentally but also physically, their growth was not wholesome? What was missing here? I bet many of the viewers know the answer already. Even if the physical environment did not exhibit any major problem, what was overwhelmingly missing was the warm care provided by human beings. To begin with, the number of children outnumbered the adults who were able to take care of them. In the worst cases, in some institutions, it was reported that there were about 20 babies to one adult caregiver. Compare with the situation in Japan. Generally, in infant care, there are 3 babies to one teacher. Ample attention is given to the care of these infants. This is the standard here in Japan. If you compare this to the situation where there's only one adult to 20 babies, what can be done in such a situation? It goes without saying that the care provided under such circumstance is going to be unnatural, strained. It cannot be helped. For example, everything had to be done at once. Feeding had to be done at once. Perhaps that is acceptable. But bathing, giving them shower, to do this to many children with few adults, it can be very dangerous. However, even more striking is that in these films, we saw scenes of how they were made to urinate and defecate. A number of potties were lined up in a row, and the infants were forced to do their business at the same time. Each child has his or her own timing to pee and poop, but regardless of that, they were forced to excrete in mass. In other words, these children, when normally children have individual desires to do this and that, but they grew up neglected. Their individual wants were absolutely ignored. These were little infants, so they get scared easily, they become insecure. It's natural for them to be scared when it gets dark and perhaps cry out for help. But when these children cried for help, did they get picked up by someone to be comforted? No. In most cases, they didn't. Overwhelmingly, actually. They were scared, they were feeling insecure, wanted to hold on to someone to get comforted, to be filled with sense of security, but these did not come easy for these children. As a matter of fact, the most serious deprivation for these children was the deprivation of attachment. In a normal environment, it is natural for children to experience attachment to some extent. When attachment, which is supposed to be a natural experience for children, was not given sufficiently, that caused many developmental damages, not only psychological, but also physical. This is what this state-of-the-art research is confirmed, among other things. Speaking of physical damages, with state-of-the-art science, what is happening in the children's brain on a microscopic level is being researched and looked at. Normally, a child's brain will grow in the first 6 years, meaning by the time they reach elementary school, to about 90% of the adult size and weight. It weighs about 300 to 400 grams at birth and will become more than 1 kilo, 1.1 or 1.2 kilograms in one go. However, some of the children growing up in these institutions were experiencing the opposite. Already at this young age, there were atrophies in the brain in some cases. It was reported that some of the children in these institutions had atrophied brain. And there's a region in the DNA called telomere. Telomeres are in each and every cell that make up our bodies. Telomeres get shorter each time a cell copies itself. And when telomeres get too short, what it means is that the cell division has reached its limit. In other words, it means that the cell is aging. Normally, aging of the cells is not observed in infants, but in this case, it is recognized in some of the children. So, not only mentally, but also physically, these children have many hurdles in healthy development and growth. This is what these researchers have confirmed. There are multiple and comprehensive damages inflicted on the mind and the body of the children, but out of everything, the gravest damage is on the development of self and sociality. One can say that the deepest scar is inflicted on this area. Then, what are self and sociality? The disposition of the mind related to self, to take care of oneself, control oneself, and try to improve oneself. That is the power of mind that is related to self. That's how you might want to look at it. In your everyday language, any word with the prefix ji in Japanese or the Chinese character meaning self would represent the psychological factors related to self. Self-respect, self-esteem, self-affirmation, self-awareness, self-control, self-discipline. Whenever there's a Chinese character ji, which means self in a word, that means the word is related to self. On the other hand, when we think what sociality means, it would mean for one to be a part of a group. That kind of ability, the ability to get along with others, one might call it. In order to get along with others, what would one need to do? For example, in order to get along with others, you need to be able to understand what others' feelings are. That may be very important. Empathy, consideration, when someone is in trouble, to feel sorry, to want to help out and to help each other, to cooperate, or to distinguish between good and bad, and to understand that there are many rules in various settings. This kind of normative consciousness may also be very important. So, in terms of the power of mind related to self, if you have self-respect, self-acceptance, meaning to like yourself, you can accept yourself as good, and self-understanding, you understand about your nature, character, self-control. You can control your impulses, your actions. Grit is one form of self-control, one can say. Persistence, working hard persistently, and to make your own decision and act accordingly, self-discipline and autonomy. These are the important factors of the mind related to self. But then, one would wonder why, when one does not experience sufficient attachment, that is, when attachment is deprived, one would suffer damage in the development of self and sociality. In order to understand this, we need to look at the roots of the two. What is in the fundamental part of the power of mind related to self? What is at the root? It's nothing complicated, rather, it's very simple. That is, the feeling that you can be loved from others. This kind of feeling. And at the same time, the sense that you are worthy to be loved. That is at the very heart of it. No matter how hard you cry, you will not be abandoned. You will be accepted unconditionally, and you will be loved. You are worthy to be loved. This kind of feeling is at the very heart of the matter. No matter how hard you cry, you won't be abandoned. You are trusted at all times. That means your very existence is important to others. Because you are very important, even if you screech, you are not left alone. You are always protected. In other words, how us humans get to know our own worth or value is through something very simple. When you are scared and feeling insecure and cannot stand it, then you would cry out, and then someone responds to you. It's through the repetition of such exchange do you discover that you are worthy to be loved, you have the value to be loved. That's the root of it. Now, what is at the root of sociality? That is the premise for getting along with others. Certainly so, in a way. It is to know that you can trust people, the ability to believe in people, the sense of trust to others. That is the root of it. However, these children, even when they are screeching and screaming from fear and insecurity, they are abandoned in most cases. For little children to cry out or scream, it's equal to saying, please help me, help me, help me, help me. No matter how many times you scream, no one comes to help. When children experience this in a repeated manner, they will start to think, no matter how much I cry for help, no one comes to help me. I'm not loved. I'm not worthy to be loved. In a way, this feeling of despair gets fixated in the depth of the minds of these children. In other words, no matter how many times children cried and screamed for help, nobody helps them out. If this happens repeatedly, they will think that people are not supposed to help. People are not to be trusted. Sense of distrust towards people, this too, can get fixated in the deeper areas of their minds during childhood. These are the things that such researches revealed. As I have mentioned earlier, this and other deprivation studies have a long history of more than a century in different parts of the world. This shows that devastating and atrocious environment in which these children started their lives had a significant impact on their development, and that this fact has been recognized since early times. As a matter of fact, when we take an overview of these deprivation studies, what these studies tell us is that the mental and physical well-being of us human beings and in the formation of happiness, the most scary thing, or one of the most scary things, is that they will miss the opportunity to build the foundation of the mind that one must acquire first thing in their lives, which is a feeling that they are loved, that they are worthy to be loved, and that people can be trusted. These children did not get to build this foundation in their minds. That means these children had to spend the rest of their lives with a huge void in their mental foundation. This is one of the most scary things. When the foundation building does not go well, when that is failed, there is a high frequency of these children encountering many difficulties later in their lives. This is what these researchers have revealed. In other words, the attachment behaviors that come somewhat natural to us, for example, when you're scared and are feeling insecure, you scream and get close to someone for security. This natural behavior plays a significant role in the formation of our mental foundation. For example, the feeling of being loved, to know that you are worthy to be loved, and to know that you can believe in people. We have learned this much. And there is a wide variety of researches being conducted in the world. In fact, though I would not go into details for the interest of time, recently, the concept of non-cognitive skills is being the focus in the area of childhood and early childhood education. The ability of the mind called non-cognitive skills. What is this? Cognitive skills are, in a way, the functions of the mind measured by IQ, for instance. On the other hand, non-cognitive skills are the skills other than your intellectual quotient, something even more important. In particular, Professor James Heckman, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics, who did a research on educational economics, how much investment should be made in childhood education for a maximum result? This is the very topic of educational economics, and he started utilizing the term non-cognitive skills in his studies on educational economics. In early childhood years, the acquisition of non-cognitive skills And in order to have the children obtain a good mastery of the non-cognitive skills, ample amount of money must be invested in early childhood and childhood education. This is not only at the household level, where mom and dad invest in their child's education, but also, or rather, it's more at the government and the municipalities level that they must invest more funds in childhood education. Early childhood education means parenting support, early childhood and childhood education, and all other aspects related to education of children of this age group. So money should be spent appropriately and adequately in childhood education to improve quality. And while improving its quality, it's important to nurture non-cognitive skills at the same time. This will have a lifelong impact on the children. Their mental and physical well-being, their economic situation, and their overall happiness, this impact is significant. This is what Professor Heckman stated. And in fact, at the core of the non-cognitive skills are the self and sociality. That means it is crucial for the children to acquire the skills related to self and sociality. So you can see that other academic discipline is also focusing on the same concept. And what nurtures these non-cognitive skills or mental abilities is what I have just stated, attachment. The role attachment plays in the foundation building is significant, and it is echoed by many scholars. These many studies revealed once again that early childhood is critical, and this view is shared globally. It goes without saying that early childhood lays the foundation for an individual's life. As a matter of fact, Professor Heckman, whom I have mentioned earlier, a very renowned researcher, he actually stated that the success of elementary school education and beyond is largely dependent on the stages before, which means how well the foundation is established in the early childhood years will make or break the educational success going forward. If a steady foundation is built, the fruits of education that one would receive in elementary school and beyond can be steadily accumulated. On the other hand, if the foundation is not well established, if the base is unstable and wobbly, no matter how massive or heavy the elementary and onward education is, there is no way that wobbly base can support it. So that is why the building of the foundation is very important. And among all the aspects of the foundation, self and sociality are particularly important. Furthermore, what is at the root of the concept of self and sociality to support it is attachment. This is what is being discussed lately. Now, I would like to take a deep dive into attachment. You attach to someone to be filled with the sense of security. In a way, it's as simple as that. But this simple act has a significant role in our well-being and happiness. This is the thinking professed by John Bowlby, the British child psychologist. Bowlby dealt with children with problematic behaviors as well as with different mental issues. Through his practice and also upon requests by the WHO to look into the orphans of the war about the effects on their development, it is known that he realized the significance of attachment. Especially in case of human children, even when they are scared or are feeling insecure, they cannot move by themselves to attach to someone. It will take approximately half a year before they are able to crawl, and about a year until a child starts toddling. That means even if a child is feeling scared or insecure, they cannot approach someone to seek comfort for quite a long period. That is to say, they need to bring caregivers close to them and give them proximity. They cannot be filled with the sense of security unless the caregiver comes to them and touches them or holds them. That means the weight of the role that the adults play in the formation of attachment in humans is far greater. How the grown-ups face and deal with the children's strong sense of insecurity will have an impact in their upbringing later in their lives. Human infants are born very immature and helpless compared to other primate species. From quadruped walking states, humans evolved to bipedal locomotion or walking on two legs. This caused the structural changes in the pelvis which caused the narrowing of the birth canal. If humans were still quadrupedal, babies could stay in the womb for about 21 months before they are born. But if they stayed in the womb for that long, they will become too big to pass through the narrow birth canal. So spontaneous delivery or natural birth would be difficult. So childbirth needs to happen when the baby is still small enough to pass through the birth canal. Therefore, the infant can stay in the mother's womb for only about 10 months, even though originally they are supposed to stay there for much longer. They have to be delivered in about half of the ideal time for development. So it is no surprise that the neonates are very immature. Not to mention in motor skills, but also in feeding skills, they cannot feed themselves unless the nipples are brought right to their mouths. And also, human newborns are born completely naked. Adults are naked too, but what I mean is that the neonates do not have the ability to generate heat by shivering. As grown-ups, when it's cold, we shiver in order to generate heat to maintain our body temperature. But the infants do not have that system. So in this sense too, human neonates or newborns are so helpless. That is what we know. But on the other hand, it is also known that their body weights are very heavy. So human infants are immature but are heavy. This is to say that they are very high maintenance. The burden is very high in raising the children. This is considered to be one of the characteristics of the human neonates. In addition, it's not just the neonatal period that they require intensive nurturing. Even after infancy, before the period called adolescence, when they start showing secondary sexual characteristics, there is a period called childhood. Human children have an extremely lengthy childhood period. After infancy, before the secondary sexual characteristics kick in, this period is very long. What this means is that human children are high maintenance not only when they are babies but also for a much longer period thereafter. They need to be cared for and provisioned. The burden of rearing the offsprings is very heavy and it lasts for a long time. That is to say that the mother cannot rear them alone. Mothers need to be helped and supported to raise children. When it comes to us humans, fathers play an important role, grandmothers play an important role. Many studies and theories have demonstrated this fact. But what makes humans stand out is the cooperative child-rearing style. Mothers not only get help from the kin to raise her offsprings, but they are also helped by the members of the community or allo-parents. In a way, neighbors and community members cooperate to rear offsprings. Otherwise, the burden to rear immature, dependent offspring is too much to bear. it has been practically impossible to do this without cooperation. The original form of child rearing is collaborative breeding. Child rearing for the hominids involved cooperation of many people in the group. This is how we have been raising children. With this in mind, when we look at how it is done in modern days, especially here in Japan, compared to the original style of child rearing seen from the biological perspective, the situation today actually is very unnatural. Child rearing is still seen as the responsibility of the mothers. There is a tacit expectation. That is often a problem. How we can effectively change such situation? Most likely, the form of child rearing that suits the present era. How can parenting be supported in modern days? Perhaps this group must have, at the core of its mission, the theme related to this issue. This may be something that you might want to keep in mind. Now, getting back to the main topic, human children are born very immature and underdeveloped. That makes it necessary for the adults to make the move to give proximity to the child. In the formation of attachment, the role of adult is much larger in early stages. This point is to be noted. Attachment is considered in relation to this circle of security. So let's take a minute to consider the circle of security. I hope you can take this home from this presentation today. But before I go into the detailed explanation of the circle of security, let me discuss the academic definition of attachment. You can see here the definition of attachment. You see many difficult terms. You do not need to memorize these, but there are two important points in this definition, and I would like to draw your attention to these. The important points in this definition, there are two, and let me mention the first one. You see in the definition the phrase negative emotions such as fear and anxiety. As I have mentioned earlier, attachment is seeking proximity. But when the child is emotionally unstable, this is where you may want to make note of. In other words, sometimes children seek proximity when they are having an extremely good time and want to play more. This, of course, is very important, but this is not called attachment in its original sense. And at the same time, as I have mentioned in the beginning, skin-to-skin contact and the comfort derived from it, or skinship, is not exactly the same as attachment. After all, attachment is seeking for proximity when the child is threatened or scared and is emotionally unstable. That is attachment. There is another point in terms of terminology. Here, you read proximity to specific others. Specific does not mean just one individual. Fixed, several individuals is the meaning of the word. Proximity is proximity, but attachment is not seeking proximity to anyone and everyone. The original healthy attachment is when the child is scared and feeling insecure, the child would seek proximity with specific individuals to seek the sense of security. Seeking proximity with just anybody, I have just touched upon the research on the Romanian institutionalized children. Actually, some of these children have shown attachment disorder symptoms. There are two major categories of attachment disorder. I try not to use the jargons, but the first one is the disorder of not attaching or not seeking proximity. Even when they are scared, they don't seek proximity. And the other one is to seek proximity with everybody. The disability that exhibit extreme proximity-seeking behavior. When the child does not get sufficient opportunities to build attachment, the characteristics that I have just mentioned become noticeable. This fact is widely understood. In other words, the proper healthy form of attachment does not include seeking proximity irrespective of who you are. When the child is feeling scared and insecure, at home it would be the mother or the father. Seeking proximity with specific individuals is the healthy attachment. In case of children attending nursery school, proximity seeking with a specific teacher or teachers, that is the healthy attachment in its original sense. So when the child is feeling scared and insecure, the child seeks proximity with specific caregivers. This is the form of attachment in its original sense. When a child is feeling scared and insecure, and if the child is able to seek proximity with specific individuals and is given proximity to be filled with a sense of security, the more this kind of opportunity the child has, the more sense of security the child fills his or her mind with. The proximity that is given, sure and secure, and the sense of security the child feels will give rise to the feeling of predictability in the child in a very stable manner. When one is scared and anxious, one can get attached to a secure caregiver. The more the child has this kind of experience, the better sense of predictability the child can have. What is predictability? It is to know whom to go when something happens. When something happens, I can shout out to that caregiver and this individual will come for help. This is predictability. When the child has a sense of foresight or predictability built stably within him or her, once the feeling of foresight or predictability is established in the child can start exploring spontaneously. The child can start an adventure, try different things. Indeed, children are born curious. They want to see this, see that, go there, try this. Their curiosity is limitless. On the other hand, however, children have anxiety. They are bundles of curiosity, but at the same time, they are overwhelmed with anxiety and fear. In a way, little children are going in between curiosity and anxiety and fear in a constant manner. I think we can look at it in this way. I have gone up to this point yesterday. I'm curious what I can find beyond this point, but it's so dark and I don't know what I will find. I may find a ghost. What should I do if I find one? I'm scared of ghosts. I can't go because I'm scared, but I'm curious to find out what's in there. This is exactly what they are going through. They are going back and forth between fear and curiosity. However, once the child has the feeling of foresight well established within the self, at one point the child can take a bold step forward. I'm so scared of the ghost, but if I find a ghost, then I can scream for help. Then mom and dad will come right to me. Or the teacher will come immediately to rescue me and will make the ghost go away. They will protect me for sure. If that's the case, I may give it a try. Okay, let's do it. This is how children make bold new steps into the area that they were too scared and anxious to explore beforehand. This is what is taking place in their minds daily. It may not be noticeable, but such experiences happen constantly and they accumulate within the child's mind. And this is how the child's range of activity expands little by little. In other words, the child gradually becomes capable of exploring independently. So in this sense, attachment in a way is paradoxical. What I mean by this is that the more the child gets to have proximity with a caregiver when they are feeling anxious or scared during infancy, the less they are likely to be clinging to others as they get older. They will become more independent. This ability to stay independent is called autonomy, if you allow me to use the jargon. As grown-ups tend to think the other way around in some cases, don't we? I want my child to become independent. I want my child to be strong enough to take care of everything on his or her own. Then it may be better to simply leave the child alone when he or she is crying. By leaving the child alone, the child will persevere and will become strong and independent. This is how you may think. And then you may try it out. And as a matter of fact, what happens most likely is the contrary to the adults' thinking. In general, they will turn out to be less independent. Actually, when a child is desiring proximity, and if that desire is not granted, conversely, becomes obsessive about proximity. In many cases, ordinarily, chasing after a caregiver or clinging will become noticeable. And this tendency is intensified in the latter cases. Severe chasing or clinging means that the child cannot stay alone, will become dominant. So in this sense, this concept of attachment, although the original meaning of the word is to attach or to stick to something, what is most important in this theory of attachment is this: how much a child acquires the ability to be independent, or how well the child acquires the foundation of autonomy, is regarded as very important in this theory. So now, based on these perspectives, let's consider the circle of security. You have two hands here with the palms facing us. This symbolizes the adults whom the child trusts. At home, it would be the mother, father, grandma, or grandpa. These adults play two roles for the child. First role is as a safe haven, and another role is as a secure base. Children are filled with curiosity. I want to see that, I want to go there and try that. Curiosity keeps on growing. This is how they engage in spontaneous play. Of course, being young, they go off balance and trip. When it hurts, they cry, they lose track of time while playing and realize that it's dark, they get scared and cry. Stranger pops out of the blue and they're surprised, they cry. Once they get scared and anxious, they know where to go, whom to seek for comfort. This grown-up for the child is a safe haven. This functions as a place to go and seek protection, which is always granted. You will always be safe if you go there. So you go to this individual, you are held, cuddled, and comforted. Once you are filled with a sense of security, the same individual now can be a secure base. And the child plays spontaneously again and will have fun. The child jumps and falls again or gets scared. Then again, the child can change the vector of the mind to now go to that person because protection is guaranteed there. Run to the safe haven, be held, comforted, regain the sense of security, and then the child would make this individual the security base and resume exploration. But when he or she is scared again, will go back to the safe haven, and once filled with the sense of security, the same individual will be the secure base again. So children repeat this process again and again every day. This graphic schema shows this seemingly natural and obvious process, but this obvious process, how smooth and natural the circle is running, will have a critical impact in the child's mental and physical health. How stable is this circle? How natural is it running? And in attachment theory, a child's growth is defined as the smooth running and gradual enlarging of this circle. When they are 0 or 1, the circle is very small. They get scared so easily and will run to the mother and sit on her lap. When they turn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, elementary school, middle school, and onto high school and adulthood, the circle keeps on expanding. This is the growth and development of human children. The circle keeps on getting bigger. This means, as mentioned earlier, that the child's ability to stay by him or herself becomes stronger and stronger. They acquire and enrich the skill. They can stay independent for a longer time. Furthermore, to be able to stay alone longer is the growth and development of human children. But the fact that the circle gets bigger and the time alone becomes longer means that the child no longer needs to get back to this safe haven. They seldom need to go to the safe haven and base. If that is the case, you might think that the safe haven and base are no longer needed and they can disappear. That may be the thinking. However, the fact that they are seldom revisited does not mean that these safe haven and security base can disappear. In fact, they must not disappear. As a matter of fact, this haven and base need to be there all the time. That's absolutely important. In fact, the word attachment means to stick or to cling to. Though the word means to stick, it does not mean that they need to be sticking with each other physically. That is not the thinking. Rather, the feeling that if need be, you can get attached. That assurance, that is important. If something happens, there is a place that I can get back to. There is someone who protects me. Which means a place where you can check back in is always there. That is what is important. This is the basic thinking of attachment. When something happens, there is always someone to attach to, stick to. To establish this feeling within the child is very important. In order to do this, during early childhood, caregivers must demonstrate well the role of safe haven and secure base. I have been discussing the safe haven. When the child is distressed and anxious, accept and empathize with their feelings, help them regroup their emotions, and give them a sense of security. That is the role of the safe haven. And what is the role of the secure base? I have touched briefly in the beginning. But once the child gets the emotion regrouped and is ready to go back, rather than keeping the child by you, you would actively encourage the child to go ahead and explore so that the child can go once again to play independently or with the peers and siblings or be engaged in activities. So at this stage, let the children go and encourage spontaneous exploring and adventure and to cheer them on. That is the role of the secure base. When the adult caregiver acts as the safe haven and secure base in a balanced manner, the circle of security is smooth and stable, and the child can gradually expand this circle at its own pace and acquire autonomy. In parenting, we tend to think that parenting or child rearing is about doing so much for the child for the good of them. Of course, there are so many things that we need to do for them, but doing things is not necessarily the only important thing. What is most important in parenting is that you be there for the child as a safe haven and a secure base all the time. The sure and secure haven to which the child can check back in when they are distressed, and to cheer on the actions and possibilities of the child as a secure base. That may be the most important thing in parenting or child rearing. I would be delighted if you can take this as a take-home message. I have slightly gone over the allotted time, and I have more to discuss if time permits, but for now, I would like to close my presentation. Thank you very much for your kind attention during this lengthy presentation.
遠藤先生、ありがとうございました。
Professor Endo, thank you very much.
ではここから
Now we would like to move on to the discussion session. If any of you in the audience would like to comment or ask questions, please type them into the chat or Q&A boxes on the Zoom screen. For the discussion session, we have the pleasure of inviting Ms. Masayo Sonoda, a very familiar face at this conference, as the moderator. Let me introduce Ms. Sonoda briefly. She has founded in 2010 an NPO called Babywearing Lab Japan. She has been working on raising awareness on the right ways to baby wearing, and the organization hosts disaster prevention seminars as well. And Ms. Sonoda currently is in the doctorate program of the University of Tokyo Graduate School of Interdisciplinary Information Studies. We would like to hand it over to Ms. Sonoda. Ms. Sonoda, it's all yours. Thank you very much. We already have some questions coming in, but first, thank you very much for the valuable presentation, Professor Endo. I wish I took your lecture while I was in the master's program. Let me read out the questions that we have received so far. Is there any numerical indicator to measure the time and the intensity it takes for the attachment to be formed between the child and a specific caregiver? What do you think? What is your reply, Professor? In terms of measurable indicator, on the research level, there are attempts made to quantify. But in reality, for example, the more involvement, the better. And the kind of numerical targets are not that important. Rather than that, the quality of each interaction is more important. That's what some studies say. So in a way, humans are emotional creatures. So rather than the physical actions of what was done or not done, what kind of emotion the caregiver displayed during that action and how well the child was able to regroup his or her emotions due to that action is more important. So the quality of each experience seems to be more important. That's what some of the researchers say, I think. Thank you, Professor. When we are teaching and trying to raise awareness about baby wearing, we tend to say that the quality of baby wearing is important as long as you're doing it. And comfort.
になりがち。
We tend to
私たちも
focus
最
on
初の頃
that.
そういうふうに思っていた節もあるんで
We
すけれど
tended
も、
to
そうい
think
うこ
in
とでは
that
なく
way.
全体とし
But
て
rather than
赤ちゃ
that,
ん、子
overall
供への
or
関わりという
comprehensive
こ
involvement
と
with
な
the
んです
baby
ね。
is important.
そうで
Is
すね。
that correct?
抱っ
Yes.
こすごく
So
大切
holding the
で、子供
baby
抱っ
is
こ
very
やはり好む
important,
わけです。
and children prefer to be held.
時にですね、
But
子
sometimes
供の中に
there
は
are
抱っこ
children
されな
who
がら
are
も不
still
安で不安
very
で仕方がないという
anxious and
ケース
distressed
も多々あ
even
るわけ
when
で
they
す。
are being
言
held.
ってみれば、今
That
日
is
ちょっ
to
とね、
say,
アタッチメントの
although
個人差って
today I
いうと
did
ころのお
not
話
get
はで
to
きなかったん
discuss
で
the
すけれどもです
individual
ね、
differences of
ずっと言っ
attachment,
てみればお母さん
but
に何回
let's
も
say
くっ
if
つ
a
いてです
child
ね、
is
昨日くっ
clinging
つい
to
て
the
るけど、
mother
ずっ
but
とぐ
is
ずった
still
状態を
cranky
長く続けて
and
しまう
is
ようなお
cranky
子
for
さ
a
ん、
long
ね、そうい
time.
うお子さんっていうのが、確かに一つ
There
のタイ
may
プとして
be
ね、
a
いるというこ
type
とが知ら
of
れているんですが、
children, and
そういうお子さん
actually
なんか
there
は
is one
実は抱っこされている時
classification
間
of
は他のお
children
子
like
さんに
that.
比べて
And
は
for
るかに
these
長かったり
children
しま
may
す。
be
しか
held
し、
by the caregiver
抱っ
for
こ
a
され
much
てい
longer
ながら
time,
もずっと
but
ぐずり続
they
けて、
are
言ってみれば
cranky
不安で
even
不安
when
で仕
they are
方がない
being
わけで
held.
す。
That means
物理
they
的
are
には、ね、
anxious all the
安全な
time,
状態で
and
す。抱っこされて
physically
いる。
they are
だ
in
け
a
ど、
secure
言ってみれば
state,
そのお子さんというのは、
but
お母さんの気持ちと
those
いうのをやっぱり
children
信じきれていないんです。
cannot
またお母
believe
さ
in
ん
the
にどっか
mother's
行っちゃうん
emotion,
じゃないか、また自
and
分を置
they
いて
think
帰
that the
れるんじゃないか、
mother
ね。
may be
ど
gone
んなに
again,
今
they
抱
will
っこ
be
されていた
abandoned
としても、
again.
ひとたび子供
And
が
even
そん
if
な
they
こ
are
とを考
being
え始め
held,
たら、
once
不
the
安で不安
children
で仕方
start
がなく
thinking
て、
in that
もうひ
way,
たす
they
ら、
become
そこで
anxious
ず
to
っ
the
とぐ
point
ずっ
they
てしま
cannot
う。
help
時
it,
にはもう絶
and they
対
start
もうまた
whining,
自
and
分のことを置いていか
sometimes
ないで
they
っていう
show
抗議の意味で
vehement
激しい怒り
anger
をそ
towards
の
the
お母さん
mother
にぶつ
as a
け続
display
けて
of
しまう、そういうこ
protest,
ともあるわけで
asking
すね。
not to
だからただ
abandon
単純
them
にその
again.
物理的にくっついていれ
So
ば
it's
いい
not
ということ
necessarily
では
about the
必ずしも
simple
なくて、
physical
子供がど
contact,
んな気
but
持ち
rather
で今
you need
自分
to
と一緒に
think
いるか
about the
なっていう
emotion
部
of the
分をむ
child,
しろ、
what
ね、
and
少し考
how
えてい
this
ただいた
child is
方がいい
feeling
のかな
now.
というふう
That's,
に
I
思う
think,
ところ
more
なんです。
important.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. I
多
think
分皆さん
everybody
も
in
聞
the
き入っちゃっ
audience
て
is too
質問
busy
が出てこ
taking
ないの
in
か
the
もしれないんですけれど
information
も、私
and
か
they
ら
are too
一
busy
つ
to ask
伺わ
questions.
せていただ
So
きたい
let
んで
me
す
ask
が、
one
その
myself.
乳幼児期に形
The
成され
base
た土
that
台
is built
とい
during
うものが、
infancy
従
or
来研
in
究され
early
ているというふう
childhood,
に
you
先ほど
mentioned
ご紹介
that
があり
there
まし
are
たけれども、そ
longitudinal
の土台
studies.
というものは生
I
涯
have
続く
understood
も
that the
のというふうに
base
理解し
remains
ました
throughout
が、
the
逆にその
individual's
うま
course
く
of
いかない
life.
ときは、その
But
後にそういう
when
補填
it
という
was
か、
not built
やり直しと
successfully,
いう
is there
か、
any
そういった
way
も
to
のができるかどう
compensate
か
for
お尋ね
the
したいです。
damage?
もちろん十分できます。
Yes,
縦
there
断研
is
究、確かにそ
indeed.
の土台
The
形成っていうのは
longitudinal
すごく
studies
重
show
要だ。しか
that
し、
the
その
base
言ってみれば土
formation
台
is
の部
very
分でつ
important.
まずきを示した
But
人た
even
ち
if the
がその
base
後みん
building
な
was
不幸に
not
なるかっていうと、決して
successful,
そんなこと
do
はな
they
いわ
all
けです。
end up
ね。
getting
言ってみれば
unhappy?
ね、
Well,
最初
that's
の
not the
段階
case.
で、例えば
So, in a
その親
way,
御さん
at
と
the
の
beginning
間の関係
phase,
を
if
通
a
しては、な
child
かな
could
か土台
not
を
build a
作られな
solid
かった
base
って
through
いう、
the
人であっ
interaction
た
with the
としてもで
parents,
すね、例えば、
they
身近な
could
別の大人の人、
re-experience
例えば保育
attachment
所の
through
先生と
other
の
adult
間でアタッ
caregivers
チメ
in
ン
their
トを経験
proximity,
し直
such
すこ
as
とがで
nursery
きると
school
か、
teachers.
実は今日ちょっと
I
時間の関
actually
係
did
で、
not
お
get
話で
to
きなかっ
touch
たんで
upon
す
this
ね。
topic
ジェームズ・ベ
because
ッ
of
クマンさ
time,
んが手掛
but
けて
in
い
the
るような
research
研
by
究でも
James
ですね、
Beckman, for
実は
example,
家庭
the
では少しネグレク
children
トに
whose
近いよ
home
うな状
environments were
態で、
very
生
unfavorable,
活をし
like
ていたお子
neglect,
さんでも
when
3
they
歳ぐら
entered
いから2年
preschool
間、
from
幼
around
稚園に
age
通う中
3,
で、
if
言ってみればそ
if
こ
they
で、
get to
ちゃんとした大人
re-experience
の人、
attachment
保育所
through
の先生、
proper
幼
adult
稚園の先
caregivers
生と、
like
言って
preschool
みればアタッ
teachers,
チメントを経験し直す
then
中でですね、
they
実
were
はその
able
土
to
台形成という
rebuild
ところ
solid
がある程度でき
foundation
て、大人に
and
なってから、
they
40、
are
50
staying
になって
happy
か
in
ら、
their
ある
late
程度
40s or 50s. So some of the data show such things. Based on such things, there are ample opportunities to rebuild the base. However, there is one thing to be said, which is from the perspective of developmental psychology. People are capable of changing throughout their lives. That is to say that the burden that was born on the person at an early stage in life can be overcome. Human beings are capable of changing. That's a scientific fact. But there is something that we have to accept together with this fact. It is that we can change, but changing becomes more difficult as the age progresses. So in principle, change can happen at any age, but as the child gets older, it will gradually become more difficult to change. So from this perspective, the early childhood to elementary school years, at an early stage, if a transformative or significant adult caregiver can be found, then indeed, if the parent changes for the better, that parent can contribute to the rebuilding of the child's foundation, that's okay as well. So in the early phase, the importance of early childhood is worth a special consideration. That's how I think.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much,
ちょっ
Professor.
とたくさん
We
この
got a
後
last minute
すいま
rush
せん
of
質問が来たんです
questions,
けれども、
but
ちょっ
for
と
the
時間なの
interest
で
of
こ
time,
れで
let me
司会の
bring the
方にマイクを
microphone
お返
back
し
to
い
the
たし
main
ます。
moderator.
はい、園田さんありがとう
Thank
ご
you
ざい
very
ます。
much,
遠
Ms.
藤先生もあ
Sonoda
りが
and
とうござい
Professor
ます。皆さん
Endo.
も本当にたくさん
Thank
のご
you,
質問、多
audience,
分
for
聞
your
けば聞くほどどんどん
participation.